YouTube is ready to go. Hey everyone, good afternoon if you're in the UK, good morning. Those who are stateside, I'm on to tea because it's late afternoon in the UK and I can't hack drinking coffee in the afternoon, but hope if you're in the US you've got your morning coffee. I'm going to be talking today about turnarounds, challenges, specifically what to do in SEO when you're under pressure, when performance isn't where you want it to be, or worse, you're getting actually really bad results. And I'll talk a bit about why this is today's topic in a minute. But yeah, before we get started, hi, welcome. My name is Will Critchlow. I'm founder and CEO at SearchPilot. We are an enterprise SEO testing platform helping really big websites turn organic search into the channel they'd always wished it could be. High performance, measurable, accountable, where you can put more effort in and get more results out. And so we work with really big e-commerce websites, folks like Marks and Spencer, Petco, as well as large travel businesses, Skyscanner, for example, Choice Hotels. And if you're looking to do more SEO testing and you're looking to bring this kind of accountability and performance to your organic search, then please do get in touch. For any of the resources today, I'm going to be tweeting out links and putting them in the comments of the LinkedIn post and on the YouTube video, because that's where all these live streams go out. So they go out on my social media at Will Critchlow on Twitter and LinkedIn, and the SearchPilot YouTube channel. And typically I do these either on a Tuesday or a Friday, so you'll have to follow along and find out when they're coming out. But if you head to searchpilot.com/live, then there's a few things on there. There's a form for getting in touch if you actually want to see the SearchPilot platform in action, see whether we could potentially help your website get high performance in organic search. But there's also resources you might find useful. So there's things like, what do we have? We've got, this is the form, we've got things like success stories, stories of things that our customers have achieved with us, introduction to SEO testing, how it works in PDF form, explanation of the theory and the practice of SEO testing, as well as tons of individual test results. You can see this whole back catalogue of test results, as well as sign up to the email list to get new ones in your inbox every couple of weeks. And this is an invaluable resource if you're an actual hands-on working SEO practitioner. I wish that when I was an SEO consultant, this resource had existed, and that's one of the big reasons why we invest so much time and energy into producing it. So head to searchpilot.com/live if you want to get any of those resources, or as I say, get in touch here as well. I've got my optimist hat on today. I am an optimist. I remain an optimist, a search engine optimist, no less. This tweet that I put out wearing my Brighton SEO search engine optimist t-shirt was kind of popular, and I've had a good chat with the folks at Brighton SEO about this is definitely their best swag, in my opinion. So I am an optimist, but there's certainly a lot of volatility out there. We're seeing a few things that I think are quite interesting and that I wanted to dig into today that hopefully can help you frame this conversation if you're having it internally, as well as give you some tools, tips and ideas if you find yourself in that tricky situation where either you've been brought in to effect a turnaround or performance has been sliding and you don't know what to do. So the first thing I'll say is one of the things that is really interesting about these times, there's all kinds of volatility going on both sides of the Atlantic in 2024, but I'm talking here specifically around Google and all the changes that have come from everything from AI overviews, all their updates, all that kind of stuff. One thing that's just really interesting, my colleague and the COO at SearchPilot, Craig Bradford, sent me this the other day. This is a section from the Expedia. Expedia is a public company, from the Expedia public company filings, and this is interesting. They explicitly call out that they could be negatively affected by search engine algorithms or similar things. They particularly call out Google. They talk about paid search, but also organic search, and they call out those frequent updates and the fact that they can be winners or losers in that process, and so can their affiliates and their partners, who obviously send them traffic, but can send them more or less traffic depending on how those sites themselves are performing in the search results. And so this is partly about pricing, but it's partly about volume. And that I think when they call out things like Google adding its own travel search functionality, then they're obviously thinking not just about algorithm updates, but about user interface changes, search result changes, and so forth. And they're not the only public company that's calling out these risks this explicitly. They're obviously one of the more forward-thinking ones, but we've seen this in other public filings as well, and I think we might see more and more of it over time. And I'm not sure this volatility is good for Google long term. Incidentally, that's probably a conversation for another day, but it does make it difficult although it can be very good for consultants, I guess. It can be difficult for teams to budget around, to plan around, to make long-term investment plans around. And without getting into any of the politics on either side of the Atlantic, stability and confidence in the underpinning rules of engagement is a big part of where business investment comes from. And I think Google would be well served to remember that they underpin that in this case. Before we get into the details of what I want to talk about today, it occurs to me that because of all of the noise around artificial intelligence overviews, the AI generated content, large language model generated content in the search results, as well as noise around ChatGPT, who we'll talk about later, Google's helpful content updates, the spam updates, the core updates, there's been something of a general doom and gloom feeling around the industry at times, or at least there are some folks who are feeling more pessimistic. Among them, there are folks whose own organic traffic or whose business's organic traffic is down, sometimes really strongly down. And we've heard a lot about some of the small players who've been, in some cases, unfairly hit, and the stellar work that some folks have been doing trying to figure out what happened, how can they do something about it, what should they do. My experience these days, much more at the bigger end of the market, much less the small business and the blogger and the small content creator, who I have a lot of empathy with, but I don't have a ton of useful advice for. I work much more these days with very, very large websites and typically large businesses, large organizations. Some of them are strongly down, and there's not been as much talk about this, I don't think. But what I did want to say is they may think, because of this noise in the industry, because of the small sites getting hit, because of the turbulence, they may think that everyone is in the same boat. They may think that, hey, it's just, this is how Google is now. There are fewer clicks, there are more stuff going to Google's own properties, there's more zero-click searches and those kinds of things. That is not true. Not everybody is in this boat. We're working with organizations in every vertical who are seeing real growth, who are all-time highs, but I'm also talking to a shocking, surprising number of organizations that are down double-digit percentages year over year. So I think the key thing to realize is there are winners and losers. This is not the channel degrading. This is folks who are struggling because of the website or the market or their individual situation, rather than Google not sending any traffic out anymore, because that's categorically not true. We see that across the broader market, and you see it in the aggregated stats. I talked last week or the week before, I think, about some of the clickstream data that Rand and SparkToro have been publishing, showing that in aggregate, Google is sending as much traffic as ever before. So it's got to go somewhere. And so if your traffic is down, your competitors is up somewhere. And I think that's the first thing to realize. They always say the first thing is to realize you have a problem. Realize that it's your problem, not a market problem. And that then we can start figuring out how we're going to attack it. And I've been banging the drum about optimism, the size of the search channel, the opportunities in SEO. I've been doing this repeatedly, probably ad nauseum. I don't actually believe there are many large websites yet that are seeing serious negative impacts from AI chat, AI interfaces, or AI overviews. Maybe someone like a Stack Overflow is a counterexample, but the majority of e-commerce and travel and similar kind of sites are not seeing that impact. If they are down, they're down for different reasons. But I worry that because some folks are wrongly, in my view, portraying the sky is falling because of AI, that if your personal sky is falling, you might think, oh, there's nothing I can do about it, this is universal. So firstly, I'm here to tell you that it's not. I've spoken to e-commerce and travel sites recently, for example, who are hitting targets, who are up but I've spoken to others who've been getting crushed. And so I think the first thing is that I think there must be, this is a bit of a side note, but I think there must be a name for this cognitive bias, for this phenomenon, where you believe that your experience is universal without really challenging that belief too much. One place I've seen this firsthand is in internal company team surveys. There's a really big tendency for unhappy team members to project that everyone else is unhappy. Thankfully, frankly, I'm not talking about internally at SearchPilot here for reasons I'll get onto. This is more of a problem historically for me, but those anonymous surveys that you sometimes kind of carry out, and you get the chance to give free-form text feedback. My experience of this on the management side of things in organizations I've run and other places where I've been exposed to, on the board or wherever, I've often seen overall happiness tick up, but one person or a small number of people report that, quote, everyone is unhappy. And so this is a total side point and total distraction, but it's why I believe strongly in avoiding anonymous feedback like the plague, because there's no way of resolving those issues, no way of discussing it, no continuity. There's no way of knowing if that one person reporting issues in each survey is the same person over time, or if this is a more pervasive issue that's affecting multiple people. And I think the worst part about it is that that individual then feels like they've done something about it. They've told management. But in fact, they haven't, because management can't know who they are. So as I say, I'm off on a little tangent here, but if you ever catch yourself saying everyone thinks, stop and think about that and try and figure out, actually, is what you mean I think, I feel, I'm experiencing. And in this case, coming back gradually a little bit to the point, I think that is the case. Some folks are hurting, but it is not pervasive. And so the actual optimistic good news about that is that this is actually a good thing, because it means it's fixable. And there is probably a diversity point in here somewhere as well, that diversity means far more than surface level differences. It applies to preferences, experiences, and opinions as well. And there are far more of those, and they're far more different than you might think. But anyway, the point being, if you are looking at scary year-over-year numbers, I think it is a good thing. So this is good news that it's not universal, it's not systemic, it's not industry-wide, because you can recover. Some of what I've seen are self-inflicted in a direct way. So scary drops from individual mistakes or changes that were rolled out that were strongly negative. Some are self-inflicted in a less obvious way. So that's compounding poor decisions over time, or things like low quality on the website that's been gradually downrated increasingly by Google, or things like poor link quality that again has had that gradual chipping away effect over time. Some are further outside of your control, so new SERP features, those kinds of things. But in all cases that I've seen, apart from just fixing broken things, I mentioned sometimes it's big screw up, and in those situations, roll that back, get it changed as quickly as you can. Apart from those situations, the on-site plan for very large websites has to kind of look somewhat similar, I think. It's all about turning organic search into that performance channel. And this is where I'm looping back to the beginning, but I've been banging on about this over and over again. It's about making it measurable. It's about making it accountable, because then you can turn it into part of a program. And in our world, this is typically an experimentation program, because that's a space where you can then manage the program to metrics instead of managing the individual activities. Did we make that change in a timely fashion? Did we was it a good change? Those kinds of things, which are less scalable. Once you've got a program in place, you can manage the program to program metrics, things like testing cadence, win rate, and that gives you a really strong answer to that question of how do we grow faster? How do we put more budget into this? And I mentioned last week or the week before that I am shocked at the number of SEO teams in-house at large brands that either don't have or don't know their targets in a concrete way, or don't have a good answer to the question, if you were given more budget, what would you do to get greater results? And it strikes me that we're in such this privileged position with the folks that we work with, where when you've got a testing program in place, you've almost always got goals, and we actually kind of quite proactively push our customers to set some goals. And not only that, but you have a very obvious answer to, well, we'd like to go faster. How do we go faster? Well, you can run more tests. You can get that cadence up. And of course, there are some more subjective things as well about trying to push win rate up and so forth. But really the important thing here is having that answer to what would we do to go faster? How would we improve more? And that becomes a burning priority when performance is down, when traffic is down year over year, or flat, or under pressure, even if just off track, missing target. But I think it's most painful when it's down. That's when you really need that answer. If you can't articulate clearly your plan for getting back to growth, then that's going to put you in a very difficult, tricky situation. And so that's what I wanted to kind of flesh out from our perspective. And again, this only applies to really large websites typically, but I've got an example that I wanted to kind of just quickly run through. So this is coming from our website. If you head to searchpilot.com, in our use cases, we've got a link to all of our customer success stories. And this is a page full of different kinds of industries, different kinds of results, focusing on different kinds of things, whether it's conversion rate or visibility or win rate. But I want to talk today specifically about the Skyscanner case here. So this actually, as you can see, was a European Search Awards winner, collaboration partnership between SearchPilot and Skyscanner. And it's quite an interesting, quite a good one to talk about, I think, because it is a recovery case, but it's not a flaw. It's not someone's fault. It came out of obviously the COVID era, and how they aimed to grow, or how they did in fact grow back above pre-COVID levels. And the crucial thing, or the headline that led to the award win, I think, was two things. One was that it was deliberate, right? So 1,000 tests over the course of a few years, and I've mentioned privately a few times, I think, but I'm not sure if I've talked publicly about one of the reasons I love this story so much is the amount of mutual support that went on during this time. It was a tough time for everyone, but especially a tough time in travel. And it's kind of crazy to think about such a small business as SearchPilot propping up or kind of helping a massive business, many times our size in Skyscanner. But there was something mutual and collaborative there. When we headed into the pandemic in early 2020, SearchPilot had, I think it was like 3 of our 5 biggest customers were travel, and 2 of those went away. Either the brand went away completely, the budgets went away completely, the team got reallocated. And the award win with Skyscanner came from the fact that they continued investing throughout that whole time. And we supported them with a variety of COVID measures around cash flow and around discounts and payment and so forth. But the ultimate thing that worked was, and I remember going into COVID thinking back to, we traded as Distilled, not as SearchPilot, but we traded through the global financial crisis, so 07, 08, 09, and I remember leaning heavily then on this idea that companies and brands that invest in tough times come out stronger than their competitors who cut investment to save costs during those times. And I remember studies that were done around this. There was stuff in The Economist, in the FT. And for us back then, it actually wasn't too challenging, I think, because digital was so new and the web was growing so strongly that even with the chaos in the financial markets, our bit of the industry carried on growing every year through that, almost every quarter. We had a slight slowdown in, I think it would have been early 09. So if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, Lehman goes bust in late 08, and our sales pipeline completely ground to a halt in early 09. And it wasn't so much the customers were cancelling, it was that new projects weren't kicking off. We weren't losing to no's, we were losing to no decision. And that was, I think, a cash flow thing and a credit crisis thing and a businesses not knowing whether they could invest thing. So it was quite different to early COVID when SearchPilot saw tens of percents of our MRR disappear in the course of 4 to 6 weeks. And we ended the year back up because we carried on investing and we carried on putting effort in through that time. But anyway, the story of Skyscanner was that they did those deliberate things. And not only did they end up above pre-COVID levels, but they actually ended up outpacing the industry as well. So they got above where they were, had some huge individual year-over-year growth numbers, and where I got it somewhere, the it outpaced their competitors. That here we go. At the time that this award entry was put together, the industry as a whole was still 23% below its pre-pandemic levels. At a time when Skyscanner had got themselves back above the pre-pandemic levels, which is super cool. But so a few things about this program was, I think we kind of saw it here in a sneak preview. A single positive test paid for the whole program. And that's one of the things that gave the freedom to iterate and invest through such turbulent times. I think during this time, as I said, average 28 positive tests a year, but actually one single test delivered uplifts across 5 markets, which was an ROI. That covered the cost. So from there, everything else is gravy. And so with those business benefits locked in, they could continue to focus on building up above where they were in the past. As I said, this helped them outpace their competitors. So not only were they doing great things in its own right, but they were getting ahead of the competition. And I think that's one of the key things. If you're in that challenging situation, you have to realize that your competitors are not standing still. If you're down year over year and you've got competitors who are up, growing, then they're not just sitting there happy that they're growing. They're going to be continuing to invest. And so you need to think about that in your planning as well. And some of these results, as I say, were just kind of stellar. And I don't like leaning on these too much because some of this was the industry bouncing back, but you can see that it wasn't just the industry bouncing back because the outpacing of competitors tells us that story. So zooming back out, this was a deep dive into Skyscanner, but the key things are when times are challenging, you've got to do something about it. Just hope is not a strategy. When you are affected, but it's not affecting everyone, that does give some sense that there is a different strategy that could work better. There is some opportunity to fix or improve or recover from these things. And you put those things together and that means you've got to do something to recover. So what are you going to do? What is the plan that gives you that plausible timeline heading from where you are to where you want to be? And can you articulate that to the organization? Does it have credibility? Does it have some numbers behind it? And crucially, does it have that connection from activity to results? And that's what we're spending all our time doing, whether it's looking for upside and growth or whether it's recovering from drops. And so I think, if you're in any of these positions, if you're especially in one of the industries I mentioned, but if you're a very large website in any industry and you're struggling, I'd love to see if I can help. I'd love to sense check your plan. I'd love to chat these things through. I'm very easy to find. I'm all over social media, at Will Critchlow on Twitter and LinkedIn. And my email is pretty easy as well. It's firstname.lastname@searchpilot.com. So drop me a line because I really want to help. This is something I'm very passionate about. I believe, as I said right at the top, I'm the optimist, I'm the SEO optimist. I do believe that this channel has so much potential for all of these large websites. As I say, that's where I specialize these days. So I can't help small bloggers very much, but I think I can help if you're a large scalable website and you're not seeing that growth or you're under pressure. And what I would be encouraging you to put in place is a program that you can measure the activities of, where you have that plausible belief and evidence that those activities are connected to the results that you want to see, so that as you start to get those results, you can do more of them. You can increase the pace of your program. You can improve the quality of your program. And in our case, that's test cadence and win rates. You can work on those things, and it gives you purpose, gives you direction, gives you hope, lets you believe that you can recover from these situations. As I say, we have seen some quite radical drops. The Skyscanner COVID one is an extreme example, but the key of having that plan, having the program whose metrics you can measure, and tying those lead indicators into the results you want, that's the business case that you can take and get investment behind and realize that what got you here won't get you there. And in particular, if things have gone wrong, you've got to change something. So that's the end of the turbulence and roller coaster bit of what I want to talk about today. The other thing that I thought, a couple of bits of news that I thought were perhaps interesting to just noodle on in the final few minutes while we're on today. One is I saw this news that following the API deal, Reddit has apparently blocked all search engine crawlers except Google. which is, I haven't actually validated, because obviously it's possible to cloak robots.txt. So I'd love to see if folks have seen them drop out of other search engines. I think this is a very interesting play from the Reddit perspective. We talked about probably a month or two ago now, the incredible timing and let's just say timing of the growth that Reddit has seen in Google search results just around when they needed it for their IPO. And there is that feedback loop that Reddit is one of those places where new original human generated content is produced. How you differentiate it from the new original non-human generated content is perhaps an interesting and challenging question, but there is new human content produced there, along with sites like Twitter. But text content produced by humans, it's quite hard to come by. And so you can see Google making that play. And in a week when Facebook has open sourced its model weights for its latest model, and they're obviously trying to commoditize their complement. It is going to be very, very interesting. I saw a lot of different implications going on at once here. You think about the huge energy increase that we've seen. Both Microsoft and Google have talked about their energy use increasing and the lower percentage of green energy they've been able to use as a result, which has echoes of crypto. You see the stock market getting jittery about whether these hundreds of billions of dollars invested in AI is going to pay off commercially on the one hand. On the other hand, or in a different angle, you see things like the CrowdStrike issue this week, which took down something like 1% of all Microsoft computers around the world, and biased towards those in big organizations who are using the CrowdStrike platform for compliance and monitoring. Apparently, that arose in part because of old EU agreements with Microsoft that date back to the antitrust trials around Internet Explorer and its bundling with Windows. And that's why, maybe not the proximate cause, but root cause of why things like Linux and OS X were unaffected by the CrowdStrike, where these things run in user space instead of the kernel space. I'm out of my technical depth here, but apparently Microsoft is not technically limited from doing that. They are commercially and legally and operationally limited from doing that, having that layer of protection because of old EU judgments. And I thought there's something interesting going on there in the search space, because when you think about the dominance of Google, not Reddit, I don't think anybody could claim that Reddit is a monopoly, but there's been a lot of questions around Google's monopoly, and if they do start monopolizing some of these human created text content for themselves, I'd be very interested to see where regulators go with those kinds of things, even if they didn't do it, I guess, because maybe this wasn't part of the deal. Maybe it was just, I don't know, total speculation. But anyway, that's one interesting bit of news. The other one that's even more breaking news is this launch of the search engine from OpenAI. I don't know if it's officially called SearchGPT. I saw people calling it that. And I think this is, obviously catnip to search geeks like me. And everybody's going to want to play with it. Everybody's going to want to get early access. Everybody's going to be fascinated by it. We're going to see 1 million articles and pitch decks updated and so forth. And, let's lean in to all of the fun that we could have there. But on the commercial side, I don't see it being an immediate impact on anybody's business. It's not going to immediately stop people Googling. It's not going to grow fast enough to be an interesting channel in the very short term. But it is going to be interesting to watch. So, yeah, don't panic. Stay calm and geek out. I think that's, wear your Search Engine Optimist t-shirt if you have one. I hope something in there has been useful to folks this week, because while I try and keep the tone of these things light, I do realize that there are, when we're talking about these business performance issues, year-over-year declines, any of those kinds of things, that there are businesses and livelihoods at stake. And that can be really tough as well. So if you just need to chat about these things, and as I say, especially if I'm in a position to actually help or do anything about it, please do reach out. And in the meantime, if you've got other things that you'd like me to talk about on future live streams, again, drop me a note. let's have some discussions in the comments. I'm sure there's some interesting stuff that folks have on their minds after all the things we've talked about this week. And head to searchpilot.com/live if you want any of the resources that I mentioned at the top around our customer stories, test results, how SEO testing works, or if you actually want to see the SearchPilot platform in action. But apart from that, have a great weekend, and hopefully I'll see you on the stream again next week. Take care.